All right, dope.
We're live.
Welcome to Good Muscle Hustle Radio. Let's go through a quick introduction, who you are, what you do, and what you're doing in the industry right now.
Yeah, so my name is Devyn Pioli. I recently just graduated with my doctorate in chiropractic about 2 weeks ago. I've been doing some online coaching for strength coaching, a little bit of rehab since like 2021, I think in the summer. And yeah, my plan with the degree is to, go full-time remote rehab in that setting. I also do some in-person personal training on the side of that. Yeah, and like background before that was just exercise science.
Okay. Awesome. You got it.
Yeah. So, with the online space, the online rehab is a new terminology for me. I know like the online coaching, programming, nutrition, stuff like that, but kind of walk us through what your venture is with the online rehab and some of the roadblocks and some of the successes that you've had and what you're seeing over the next 5 to 6 years for you personally and kind of where you want to take that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that the biggest thing is like, it's really not that different from online coaching. Like the population that I see are typically people who are already involved in the gym and just dealing with some nagging pain, whether it's back pain, hip pain, knee pain, stuff like that. And it's really just a matter of helping them manage training modifications so that they can still train alongside that, like while dealing with that chronic circumstance, because it's not always clear cut when it comes to pain, especially like compared to acute and chronic. Like acute, there's usually something going on where it's like we can relate it to a certain mechanism of injury, or it's like we just did too much at once. Maybe we felt a pop in the back, something like that. When you get into the chronic side of things, there's a lot more to consider in terms of like why things are still kind of lingering the way they are. And it's really important to dive deep into, I don't want to separate like the biological and psychological aspects, but it's like getting to know somebody's, beliefs around their painful circumstance and kind of navigating the situation that way. That's not to say you don't do it in the acute sense either, because it's definitely super important, because if you can prevent a chronic circumstance, like definitely valuable to do so. And just so I'm not throwing random words around too, like acute would be a situation where it's like under 3 months. Chronic would be over 3 months. So yeah, there's a lot of similarity between the coaching and the remote rehab. Like nothing significant has changed, and the track for bringing somebody in and then giving them a plan pretty much remains the same, right? Like you have an in-depth conversation, you get to know where somebody's been and where they're looking to go, and then you just build a custom plan off of that. It's always an educated guess, so there's trial and error involved, right? You set those expectations up front, and you kind of go from there. I think the difficulty there is like understanding that it's not for everyone, because there's definitely there's less you can do in terms of like on-site feedback, right? Like if you're in person, you can do a lot in like a 60-minute session, right? You give them an exercise and like you can make multiple adjustments right on the spot, and like within a span of 5 minutes, you go from looking not so pretty to very pretty. Versus in the online setting, it's more of like this week-to-week feedback, depending on like how people communicate with you in terms of sending videos. Like if you can catch them like mid-session, we're like, hey man, like this is my first set. Sometimes you can give them a cue to take into the second set, but oftentimes it's they complete the session, they upload their videos. I use True Coach. I have been for the past couple months, and I really enjoy it. And then giving them feedback there that they can then take into the next session. And again, I think it's a matter of setting those expectations up front. Like if somebody's comfortable with that, totally fine. Probably a better situation for people who are a bit more competent in the weight room, like they have some experience there. But I do have, like I've brought people through programs where it was literally like their first time doing any sort of structured exercise. I think that, again, it's just like you got to set that expectation of maybe the slower process in that regard.
Yeah. So I know we've talked a little bit about, rehab, prehab stuff, and it's pretty much just like resistance training. You know what I mean? You just got to meet the person where they're at, meet them at their ability, and then they kind of progress from there. So the theology and ideology behind it definitely aligns with just regular, programming online, stuff like that. So, yeah.
Dude, for sure. Yeah. It's, I think it's a Phil Glasgow quote, if I'm saying his name right. I might've butchered it, but it's like rehab is training in the presence of injury or pain, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you're doing the same thing, the same principles apply when it comes to progression, like specificity, overload, fatigue management, and all that. You just have this added variable of pain that you have to navigate, right? So it's like it's typically like the general recommendation for any circumstances. Let's train to tolerability and then progress them over time, right? So it's like rather than finding like a skill place, I mean, you still consider skill in this context, but it's like the same way you would find like, okay, here's a great starting point for your skill if we're trying to progress a squat pattern. You just take that same framework and be like, okay, like here's a great starting point regarding like your tolerability of pain. And then we just progress things back up from there, right? So it's like trying to make, and this is an idea that I got from Michael Mash from Barbell Rehab, where it's like trying to find the minimum effective change for the maximum level of tolerability, right? So like how little can you change while still allowing somebody to train? And that's like super important, especially if you're working with like a strength athlete, right?
Yeah.
Like they've got a competition coming up. You don't want to change a ton of shit. Like you can't necessarily take away somebody's low bar squat if they've got to compete with it 2 weeks out, right? Like that's probably going to get in their head. They're not going to feel super confident going into that meet. So it's like, what small thing can we change so that we can still train through this prep to a level of tolerability? It doesn't have to be zero pain, right? As long as we're not seeing progressive symptoms over like from session to session or set to set, like we can probably push things still, and then we can address things after the competition, right? But maybe if we just take low bar and we just move their grip in or their grip out, or maybe instead of thumb under the bar, we do thumb over the bar, just playing around with these, tiny things to see if we can just get them through this competition. And I think that's where a lot of like the lower level prep stuff that is really good at modifying symptoms in the short term, but doesn't necessarily create a training adaptation is extremely valuable, right? Like if you can give somebody a lat stretch and all of a sudden their elbow pain in low bar goes away, like let's do it for the next 2 weeks. And then after the comp, like let's expose you to some more overhead stuff so you don't have to worry about this problem reoccurring in the long term. So it's a lot of like playing that game of like, how do we modify things in the short term and then also creating long-term adaptations. And I think that also varies per individual, right? Like I work with a lot of people who share the same philosophy as me when it comes to healthcare and chiropractic and just the rehab setting, where we definitely don't like enjoy the lower level stuff. So it's like, prescribing them that it's like, if they're not going to do it, I'm not going to give it to them. Right. So it's like, I'm going to take a different approach with somebody like that versus somebody who just wants to feel better in the short term. And they think that's a valuable solution. And I think most importantly is just the narrative that you give them with it, right? Where it's like, this lat stretch isn't the cure to all your problems. Like there's a longer term approach that we're going to want to entertain, but in the short term, like we can get you feeling better and excited to show up for the gym again. Like that's a huge win.
Yeah, absolutely. I know working just in person stuff like that, getting into the industry, they don't really tell you everybody that you see is fucked up in some way. You don't get perfect individuals coming through the door that can perform overhead, can perform internal stabilization, going right into deadlift, squat, stuff like that. So and you walk the walk too when it comes to like strength training and powerlifting and stuff too. So I think with your own personal experience and then your degree behind it, I think that's a good success route for that online, rehab, prehab training, programming on that online space for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. Like people enjoy seeing people who, can share that experience. And I think my own personal experience just helps me like navigate the mindset of an individual coming to me as well. Like I've had back injuries before and I've self-managed them successfully. So it's like knowing that it's like I can build buy-in by like here, like, I had this acute back injury 10 weeks out from a competition and like, here's what I did. And I ended up PRing on the platform in my squat, like despite that. Right. So it's like, just building that level of buy-in and like people see me and it's like, I think like ranked, like there's still like 5 digits in front of my name when it comes to powerlifting. Right. So it's like, I'm not anything spectacular. Like I'm not going to nationals and winning nationals and stuff like that. But like people do look at that and they're like, oh, like he lifts a significant amount of weight. And it's like, it does give you rapport in that sense. So it's definitely valuable to just go experience the things that you're trying to coach. Right. And like, I'm currently going through trying to pick up weightlifting too, like, so I can kind of expand the population that I can work with. And like, I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing somebody through a rehab program when it comes to ollie lifts if I've never done it myself. Right. So it's like going into that first.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I know just for me personally, when I see, people online, especially in the online space, like the super nerdy glasses, super skinny, they're trying to talk smart about, powerlifting, bodybuilding and stuff. When it comes back down to them as an individual, they've never experienced that. And they can't empathize with that person that they're going through issues or having problems with performing a lift or making progress and anything along that nature too. Is just, I know AB probably feels the same way. You're a walking billboard for yourself, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah. So when it comes to, the online space or even in person too, is like if somebody wants to come in the door and I look like I weigh 400 pounds and 68% body fat, more than likely I'm not going to get hired.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
It depends on the individual too, right? Like,
yeah.
I think they're like, especially on the internet, like there's always the polarization where it's like, okay, this guy isn't jacked at all, but he might know a lot. He might be a great coach. Like, I don't think it inherently means that he's not a good coach, but I do think it helps in terms of that societal perception. And like, that's a conversation that I had with chiropractic school as well, because like in my situation, like I don't necessarily need the degree to do what I do, because it's technically coaching, it's not healthcare. Because if I were to use a clinical license in this space, I would only be able to work with people in state rather than out of state. So it's like I have constraints, but I can still use my education, right? So I don't diagnose people. I obviously can't put my hands on people in the rehabs or remote rehab setting anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But like I actually dropped out of chiro school for that situation. I was like, why am I still spending money on this when I can just do what I do now without the degree at all? Like, it doesn't change anything for me. And like that was a conversation that I had and kind of bite my ego there, where it's like it does influence societal perception, right? Like people in pain typically go see doctors for this circumstance. So it's like, am I just creating kind of an uphill battle for myself by not just getting the couple letters? And like, had I not been so far in the program, like I don't know if I would have completed it, but I was already there. So it made sense.
Well, I think the return on investment, having that DR next to the name definitely goes a long ways, especially with people who are trying to decide, okay, is he just a coach? Is he a doctorate? Kind of that mechanism of thought as well. So I know for us here in Emporia, we're going to segue into networking actually. So we've actually got what's her name? Dr. Cherie Simmons here. Then I've got another doctor reach out as well, just setting up a network that immediate care, acute care from doctors. And then what me and Alex would do is, program them for that longer runway of progression to make sure that they don't come back with that original acute or chronic issue. So have you done any network with the online space as far as, reaching out to other people who do the online rehab, any of that aspect?
Yeah. 100%. And like, honestly, that's part of the reason why I went back to chiro school, is because I found a lot of like-minded people who were doing the thing that I wanted to do. So I found a community in that space, and I constantly network, like whether it's through mentorships or just coaches that I've personally hired, or just like conversations on the internet of philosophies that I agree with, right? Like there's people in other situations where it's like they might just be able to better help the individual that I can't help just because of my lack of experience, right? Like if it's like a bodybuilder trying to prep for a stage, like I can modify training variables, but in terms of like the diet stuff, like I'm clueless, man. So it's like I'd rather know somebody who has been in that situation, before, and just refer them out that way. And like it usually just comes back to you in the end anyway, because like you just create this awesome referral network. And I think it's always super important to have, because like you just need to know. Like the reality is you can't help everybody. So like knowing a place that they can go to get the help they need is super valuable, and like the clients always appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to my philosophy too, is, we're a resource to everybody who hires us, right? If it's not within our scope, I'll do my damnedest to make sure that I get you with somebody who can take care of you. Then I'll see you afterwards. So I think that goes a long way with, referrals, with client retention. Like you said, they usually come back to you anyways. So.
And it's trust.
Yeah.
Like
trust.
If you can, the people that will say that they can do everything, but they can't, instead of like, if a client asks me something and I'm like, I have no idea, I'll be like, I don't know. Like I will ask someone smarter 100%. Than me. And they respect that, because most of the time, like, in the industry anyways, people will say, oh yeah, I can do that for you. I can do this for you. And it's like, no, met with a lot of clients where it's like, you know, they'll be like, hey, I've got this pain here, etc. Can you help me? I don't know, no idea, but we can move you around and see if we can do anything. And then from there, it's like, all right, like this, whatever would probably you know, benefit you. I'm not going to sit here, you know, before the session and be like, yeah, of course, like maybe, but yeah, having the referral network like that. And I think like for you, you know, having the education you have, but also the experience of strength training and powerlifting, like I think that's huge because most, you know, even in the physical therapy world, like they've just gone to school and like read books, but they've actually like never trained.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things of like, you know, if you've been there, you've done the work, you've done the sets, you've fucking been in, you know, in the gym doing stuff, there's a level of like connection of like what's actually happening in a gym setting and like how you're setting your body up. And I feel like there's like that gap gets closed of like, all right, here's this world and here's like the actual like active side of it. And now you can mesh together two things. So I think for you and everyone else that's in the industry that actually trains and has that education is like, you know, fucking like that's a sharp sword.
Yeah.
100%, dude. Yeah. And like, it was my experience through training. Cause I mean, I started training when I was like 13 years old. And then I think it was 2013 when I started to powerlift. And it was that like those experiences and like really having a firm understanding of training principles that helped me navigate my post-grad education when it came to chiropractic, right? Like some of the things that they were telling us about treatment, just like it didn't make sense, right? So it allowed me to like seek external information. So I knew that I was getting the valuable information that I needed to help people in the long term, right? Like, you know, some of the narratives around manual therapy like just aren't the reality of the situation. And I've like in the past, like I've bastardized manual therapy. I like to this day, like I absolutely see value in it. Like I've definitely come back around and kind of like centered myself in the middle because I was like frustrated with my education. So I was like, oh, that shit's all stupid, but like I really don't see it that way anymore, right? Like there's a time and a place for manual therapy, and what manual therapy can offer is short-term pain relief and short-term increases in range of motion, right? So it's an extremely valuable tool, but it's not a situation where it's like we're just going to adjust your back and all of a sudden like over 6 weeks of doing that, like you're going to be good to go. Now, sure, there might be circumstances where that's all somebody needs, like because you're basically just proving to somebody that they can feel better, and like maybe psychologically like that just resets their expectations, like, oh man, like I didn't even know I could feel better. So it's like all of a sudden like that just starts this cascade of people going out and moving again. And I think that's great. And in the acute sense where it's like maybe there is some sort of tissue damage, like you can modify symptoms for that natural history of progression, but you can't rush time, right? Like you're just making that experience a bit more positive than it would be by like, okay, like my pain's a 6 out of 10 all day. Can we bring it down to a 3 with some manual therapy just so you can get through the day and continue to do the activities that you want to do, right? It's a lot about decreasing the resistance to moving so people don't just sit on their ass all day, because then they get caught in this feedback loop of I hurt myself, I'm going to do nothing because I was told to rest and ice or whatever. And then we have this like, I mean, like a maladaptation, right? Like if you don't train for a while, you start to lose what you like all the progress you made, right? And it's not to say that it doesn't come back quick, but if we do that in the context of pain, and then we try to like when the pain goes away, we try to pick it right back up where we left off. It's like we just get caught in this feedback loop of, okay, now I came in red hot, I did too much at once, I get a flare up, and then I stop again, and then I do the same thing. I come back in the gym hot when the pain goes away, and I get a flare up, and it just goes on and on and on, right? So it's like helping people kind of break that cycle of let's continue to do what we can do while you're dealing with this pain so that we don't have that cascade of negative events where it's like now I'm just not as strong or prepared for movement as I used to be.
Yeah, no, that makes 110% correct to me. Is, you know, kind of like what you just referred to is, you know, it's that repetitive pattern of, okay, I'm feeling good, I'm not feeling good, rest, I'm feeling good, I'm not feeling good, rest. You know what I mean? Is I think a lot of people get scared to come back to the gym because they just don't want to go through that repetitive process again. I mean, I have a client, I've been with her for just over a year now, and she told me she was going to chiropractor twice a week, every single day for like the last 15 years. This last 6 months, she's been twice. You know what I mean? People don't understand, you know, the benefits of just a little bit of resistance training, a little bit of cardio, a little bit of proper care management with the programming writing. I mean, goes a long ways. I mean, we're not squatting, deadlifting, anything like that. We're just, you know, general pop, good health. You know what I mean? So,
Right. Yeah.
I think there's a bad stipulation with with PTs, personal trainers from like the chiropractic world or just from the physical therapy world. We're just trying to bridge that gap here in town and build a good network. You know what I mean? Because
Dude, yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Because like I think Dr. Katie Dabrowski, like she says it all the time, where it's like fitness is healthcare, right? Like you do see people more frequently than somebody would go to a PT or a chiro, right? Like there's a lot of potential for impacts there. And it's a matter of competency too, right? Because I don't think that in a lot of cases, like diagnosis isn't that important, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's like in my situation where I do remote rehab, like I don't diagnose anybody because I can't. Like it would be illegal for me to do so, right? So it's like you can talk about these things in kind of like a common context where it's like you're not speaking to the specific individual circumstance, where it's like I'm not going to be like, hey, you have a disc herniation, but I'm going to say like, hey, like here are the potential things that we could be looking at because you have back pain, disc herniation, facet syndrome, whatever, sprain, strain. And it's like, here's what we genuinely see for these conditions, where it's like, okay, good natural history for 6 weeks. And like, here's how we would typically manage it, right? You're just speaking in a general context, and you can really help these people just in that regard, right? And it's alongside that, all you have to do is like look for red flags, right? Like, are we ruling out cancer? Are we ruling out infection? Are we ruling out fracture? Are we watching for progressive like neurological symptoms like muscle weakness, new onset of numbness, things like that? Like if those things pop up, it's like, okay, like red flag, we got to take a closer look. That can be your referral, right? But it's like if somebody's just in this chronic case of pain where it's like maybe it's just due to a lack of movement, like that, there's a lot of potential for that to be the case. And I think just presenting them a healthy narrative where it's like letting them know that they're not broken. Like if you don't move and then you try to move a bunch, it's like pain typically arises, right? So it's like giving them a healthy narrative, like, hey, here's where we can start, here's where we can take you. And if things just don't seem to work, okay, maybe we take a closer look. Like that's the power of the referral network there too.
Yeah. Oh, I love everything you just said about that one. It's just kind of what AB says. It's, you know, I heard a horror story, and I'll bring this up every time I talk to new people, was we had a trainer here in town, and it just gives us a bad rep. First session, I think he was probably a brand new trainer, just a dipshit to begin with, 70-year-old lady. First session, tire flips.
Yeah.
Herniated disc, fucking got taken out in the stretcher in the ambulance. You know what I mean? So kind of segues into my next topic that I want to bring up is, you know, what are your thoughts on barrier of entry for just personal training and getting into the coaching realm?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's like, the barrier of entry of the fitness industry is slim to none. Like, I don't even know. I don't think you need a high school diploma to get certified. I don't think you even need a certification to train. I think it just gives you insurance, right? Like, I don't think there's really a standard for that. And yeah, it leads to problems for sure. I don't know if I have a solution. Like, if you want to make everybody get a bachelor's degree, like I know you need that for the CSCS. And like, I think that's why it's one of the more reputable certifications to have, because you need a college education for it. But it's like, then again, it's like people can do very good things without a college education. Like if they can self-teach, I think it's more of like a people problem than it is like an education problem. And like I'm not smart enough to bridge that gap. So I don't really know, but I do think there's a lot of good to be had between just like the networking aspect, right? Like seeing every circumstance as an educational opportunity. And I think like as a trainer, like there's a lot of potential to help a lot of people in that. And I wish that gap was closer to healthcare, because we really do a lot of the same things, right? Like in my perspective, like a lot of my chiropractic education didn't really change how I would go about like training somebody. It just gave me a lot more confidence in, I know what's going on because I'm not as ignorant to a painful circumstance as I once was, right? So it's like, I know what to look for if things are serious to get them to where they need to go, versus just being like pain. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on because I don't understand it. Right. So I think like just understanding pain to a degree, and you don't have to be like a pain science nerd to do that, but just understanding that like it is complex. There's more things than just technique. There's, you know, like there's stressors elsewhere outside of the gym that are going to play a role here. And like somebody's beliefs about their circumstance are also going to influence that. So it's like being careful about like the language used and all that, I think is super important. But in terms of barrier, yeah, man, like I don't know. Like I agree that it's a problem. I just don't have a solution.
Yeah, no, I think that's the biggest problem now is I don't think anybody really has that solution just yet. I know the NSCA's, what is it, by 2030 for any other certifications going to go to a bachelor's degree minimum requirement to even get certified through them. So they're making a step in the right direction, but you know, you can get an ACE personal training certification for $700 on the weekend, and then you're in charge of a human body.
Yeah, exactly. And like it was the same because I have my NASM CPT and it was the same thing, right? Like I don't even remember how long the test was, but I remember it being like very easy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I had like a background in education at the time, sort of like exercise science stuff. So that's probably why it was easy. But yeah, I do agree that it's definitely a problem. And I think like the way I'm gonna go about it is just networking with coaches and like the ones who are open to learning from me. Like I'd love to help educate and bridge that gap. Like I'm always open for trainers, especially in the online setting. Like if anybody wants to like hop on a call and go over like a case study, and like if I can offer some sort of value, like I'm happy to do that for people for free, right? Because like that's the part that I enjoy, is just like trying to educate and help people bridge that, because like it's something that I needed too, right? Like a large reason I went to grad school was because I feel like I didn't know enough. Like nobody could answer my questions. Why? Like what is the difference between training and rehab? And it turns out that there really isn't much of a difference at all, right? It's really just that competency behind that word of pain.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I relate to the feeling that you just described. When I first got certified and I, read through the whole manual, took the test and all that. And then once I started training people, I was like, oh shit, like I still feel like I don't know enough. And so it was like, right after that, it like sparked like, okay, I need to dive deeper into like all these other things, because I want to understand. And I think it kind of like with your education, like you said, like, you can still do stuff and still help people without like that level of education you have, but it gives you so much more context and understanding of like what's happening. So like the strive to understand like what's actually happening with somebody, and everybody's different. There's not one body that's the same. So if we're like, all right, like this is my set of whatever, squat, split, whatever. But some people that you'll work with, it's like, all right, like this squat that we're doing is not for you. Like we can't do that. And being able to understand that. And I think, especially now with just how everything is, I think like personal training anyways is for a lot of people like this money grab, because they're like, oh, I love to work out. Like I could make money doing this. So then they, they get their cert over the weekend, but they actually don't give a fuck about people.
There's no more personal in the personal training space right now.
Yeah. And that's what separates people like us. Is like actually giving a fuck and like investing money into our education and doing things in person and, understanding the context behind everything that we're doing.
100%. Yeah. Like people always come first. And I think it's a matter of self-awareness and not displaying this false sense of confidence that you know everything, right? Because that's what gets people in trouble. Like you said earlier, Alex, just like the people who are like, I can help you with everything. It's like, that's just not true. Like you have to know your limitations. And like, that's why I think it's a people problem, right? It's not a matter of, okay, maybe we need more education. Cause like, can we be certain that education is going to do some good? Like maybe we just need a level of self-awareness where it's like, hey, here's what I'm good at. Here's where we're going to cut things off. Here's where I'm going to refer out. Like, I think that's probably like just identifying that might be the most valuable thing for people.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see yourself over the next couple of years on this journey, Devyn?
Man, tough to answer, man.
I know.
Things have, I've answered this question a lot and it never turns out to how I think it's going to be. So I'm very comfortable in not knowing what that's going to look like. In the short term, like my focus, especially over the next year, is just, growing my business in the remote rehab space. because I really do enjoy that. And it provides me a lifestyle that I can also enjoy myself. It's like there's flexibility of, I can work from home, I can work from anywhere in the world if I wanted to. And there's a lot of accessibility to a lot of like-minded people on the internet. Like, I think that's one of the great things about social media. Like, I know a fuck ton of people who are way smarter than me that I never would have met had I not had access to social media. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And I think, from there, that's going to be my focus. I don't even have all my boards done because I don't need it to do what I want to do. That's potentially end of the year when I have a little bit more financial stability. There's potential that I go back and get those boards done, and then maybe end up doing like a hybrid somewhere where I do some in-person work, some remote work, but taking it a day at a time, man. Like, really just trying to grow what I have now, because I really do love it, and seeing where it takes me, really.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. So you're in Buffalo. I'm gonna go on a limb and say you're a Bills fan.
I'm not. I actually grew up in New Hampshire.
There you go. Oh, New Hampshire. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I just don't talk about football because I grew up a Pats fan. I'm not like a diehard football fan either, but I grew up a Pats fan, and like nobody likes Tom Brady up here. So I don't talk about it unless it's brought up. Like, all my patients in the clinic are huge Bills fans. Like, it's definitely a personality trait up here. But I just avoid that conversation.
No, I was gonna talk a bunch of shit because I'm a diehard Chiefs fan. I think you've seen me. I've even come into the pre-strip labs at Arrowhead,
at the tailgates,
with
right?
beers. You know what I mean? So,
100%.
Oh man, yeah. So, any other interest in sports like hockey, baseball, or kind of a little bit more personal information? We get to know you a little bit better.
A little bit, man. Like, I used to watch baseball growing up. I played a lot of baseball as well. Like, I probably played year round for like 14 or 15 years. Like, I would do any season I could get my hands on, to the point that I burnt myself out from it. I used to follow it ever since I've gone to grad school, man. Like, I've been so involved in that I just haven't provided myself the time. It was never a priority for me. So honestly, I haven't watched much of anything in the past like 3 years. Like, we did some. We used to go to the casino back where the school, the campus was, because they would show like the UFC fight nights for free. So we'd go and like bet on the fights and stuff like that. That was always a good time. But again, I haven't really watched anything in regards to that either. I'm one of the boring guys who just don't know anything about sports.
Hey, I'm on the same boat with you.
Yeah.
I'll watch the Chiefs when they get there.
Yeah. Checking into a couple of games.
Yeah, definitely postseason. And then I watched when the Royals went to the World Series, those 2 years, I was like, I watched in every game. And then
dude, that was a dream. I took my brother when we won the pennant against Toronto, took him up there. It was game 6. Because I was working nights at a manufacturing company running the wheel line business over there. So I worked all night, went home, took a shower, picked him up, drove up to KC. We were pounding beers. Game didn't start till like 7 that night.
Yeah.
Fucking he drove home because I was just done.
The way she goes.
I think too is, for me personally, one of my big things is what I want to bring to the industry and I want to bring to the community is, we're not fucking machines, right?
Dude.
We can live normal lives. We can go have a couple of beers with friends. We can eat whatever we want to eat and still be able to function and still be able to be a healthy human. You know what I mean? So I think there's a stigma too, is, always a personal trainer. They're just machines. Are all about eating healthy, lifting properly, doing all that stuff too. It's like, no, you guys can still enjoy life without having to have all those constraints to not be able to enjoy life.
100%, man. Yeah. And like, going back to interpersonal skills, like, it just allows you to connect more easily with the person in front of you. And that was a huge learning experience for me too. Like, because I had always put a lot of stock in like identity, like the things that I identified with. And it like came from like personal insecurity, right? Like, you just kind of externalize the source of it. So it's like, that happened to me during baseball. Like, I ended up burning myself out for baseball. I almost quit after my sophomore year of high school. Like, the coach convinced me to come back. So I continued to play school ball, but like, I didn't play year round anymore. I explored some other sports. Like, I wrestled throughout the tail end of high school. I played a year of football, and like, it just didn't really click with me. But yeah, I definitely kind of pulled back from that. And like, it was a cycle for me where I did the same thing with my education after I had kind of burnt myself out for baseball. I was like, okay, like, I just got to be really good at this one thing to provide value to the world. Right. So I did the same thing with my education through undergrad and Cairo school. And like, it was one of the reasons that I dropped out, right? Like I was definitely frustrated with my education and just what I was being taught, but it was definitely amplified by my dire need to find some sort of value for myself to feel like a worthy person, right? So it's like, I think that was a big turning point for me. Like when I dropped out from that, like it was a lot of just like sitting with myself and like biting my ego, like even like therapy, like weekly therapy, writing a lot and just like trying to pull back so like I can more easily allow myself to do the things that I actually enjoy rather than trying to fulfill this thing that I don't actually need to fulfill, right? Because like we all end up in the same place at the end of it. So like number one thing is just like connect with people and have fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, we're all living on a fucking rock, flying through space at thousands of miles per hour. You know what I mean? We're all going to be doomed eventually, so might as well enjoy the ride.
We all die.
Yeah. 100%, dude. And like that's kind of like it's become a bit of my coaching and rehab philosophy too, where it's like trying to get people to realize that like you can deal with this shit. Like it's just lifting weights. Like you're gonna live. Like there's more to it. Like let's make this enjoyable. Because if we're not having fun doing it, like what's the point, man? Like you're just making yourself miserable for no reason at all. So I definitely push enjoyment when it comes to training. And I don't, you know, some people can take it more seriously than others. Like I personally don't take it that seriously anymore because of my previous experiences with burning myself out. So
I mean, I think it's, you know, just personal person to person, but I enjoy the fuck out of a heavy session. I know we killed each other yesterday, you know what I mean? But there's a stipulation too, as far as, you know, like I always go back to like The Biggest Loser. You know what I mean? Some of the worst national televised personal trainers ever been. You know what I mean? And we were at the working women's convention here in town. And I talked to a couple of females who are like, man, I don't want you to kill me. It's like, it's not like that. You know, we bring you in, meet you where you're at, and then build you up from there.
Definitely shows like the perception of personal training, which unfortunately is like that. You know, people like even my new clients that I get, you know, when they're coming in for their first session, I can tell they're like nervous. I'm like, yo, relax. Like it's gonna be fine. Like like to be confident in what I'm doing, like we're gonna just move and I'm gonna take this as kind of like my first assessment with that first session. So like
let's get a hinge in, let's get a rotation in, let's get some core braces in and kind of see where we're at.
And you'll sweat and you'll feel like you did stuff, but like my goal is never to murder anybody or like have them like not be able to get off the toilet the next day. You know, it's always and then after that session, like the perception of like what they're doing, who they're working with, and this whole world changes because it's like, oh, like that's an actual like a good workout. Is like I feel good now, like I feel looser, I got my sweat going. And then obviously, like as we work through programming, like intensity will climb, but like making sure almost like a GPP of like, let's prep the body to actually be able, like tolerance, like the same thing, right? Like what do they have? What do they tolerate? Like, can we just, let's work with that. And then as we go, like, that's when we can start to progress things forward. But it's unfortunate that people are always like, when people were walking by our stand, they're like, oh no, we don't want that. And it's like, and then people were asking, do you work with older people or do you work with people with limitations? And we're like, literally like all of our
90% of my clients.
You know, there's a perception that we work with just like young bodybuilding people. And it's like, that's literally like probably like 1% of my clients.
Youngest for me is 13 and my oldest is 80. So and I enjoy, like personally for me, I enjoy working with older people because you can bring back a better quality of life. You know what I mean?
100%, man.
I get so much joy just watching people progress with their physical adaptations and being able to say, hey, you know, I went to the Royals game this weekend and I didn't hop and puff. I was able to get up and dance around when music was on. I can pick up my grandkids and play with them. I can go work out all day in the yard and still have energy to spend time with my family and do all that jazz. And that's the biggest thing for me.
And those people are like extremely grateful for that too. So they like express that to you and it's like, oh, like that's definitely like fulfilled at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because like I mean you're giving people back a valuable aspect of their life that they feel like they've lost forever. Because I think a lot of, especially in the older population, a lot of people have accepted that it's a situation where I'm just getting old and I can't do these things anymore. But it's like part of the reason that they can't do those things anymore is because they stopped doing them over time, right? There were lifestyle changes that changed behavior, and it's like they kind of stopped doing the normal activities because of X, Y, or Z reason, and then they end up in this place and they just chalk it up like, I'm just getting old. But like, I don't know, giving people back that power is definitely satisfying, and there's definitely a similarity to that in the rehab setting, where people think, oh, like I have back pain, like deadlifts are bad for my back. I love deadlifting, but I can't do it because of this back injury, and like I should never do it again. Because like, I mean, I worked with a client. He was actually a classmate of mine, and he had back surgery during chiro school. And his surgeon told him like never to squat or deadlift heavy again. I was like, fuck that, dude. Like we're gonna like he became a client of mine, and he's a freak too. Like he's so strong. Like he's deadlifting and squatting, I think over 400 pounds at this point, right? And he has a spinal fusion, right? So it's like helping people overcome that narrative to continue to do the things that they enjoy to do along their lifespan. Like I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that.
Yeah. You brought up a good point too, is, the doctor said you can never do this again. I mean, I don't think it's their spot to say whether or not they can do it again. I think where it comes to people like you, people like me and AB, we want to help get those people there. Obviously we have constraints and limitations, but when it comes from a doctor saying you can never do this again, that's such a soul crushing statement to somebody who wants to do that.
Right. And it's an abuse of power too, right? Because they're the expert in that situation. Like a lot of people don't know the things that we know. And it's like, we do have responsibility that comes with that, where it's like, if we're just giving people bullshit information, like they're going to believe it because they don't know what to believe. Like they're coming to you expecting like this guy knows what he's talking about. And if you just give them some bullshit answer like that, they're going to live with it. Right. And like you see a lot of that in chiropractic, man. Like my student clinic experience, like at the school with outpatient, it's like I had to work underneath clinicians, and like I didn't necessarily see eye to eye. And like, dude, some of the stuff that they're told is just, it's demoralizing to them. And they have this dependency on chiropractic care, where they think that if they don't come back every 2 weeks and get their bone put back in place, that they're not going to be okay. Right. Like it's pretty fucked up, like. Like
no, that's
abusing people for financial gain at that point. And maybe it's ignorance on their end. I don't, like, who knows, right? But it doesn't excuse what's happening.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I would jump to conclusion on that statement, but I think 80% probably just make that statement and just want to have return customers. You know what I mean? That's that revolving money door. You know what I mean, when it comes to some of that stuff. But that's the biggest reason why we're setting up a network here in town is, we'll have that access to people who can get you there. You know what I mean? Obviously, we talked about earlier is, you got doctor care, you got physical therapy care. Okay, let's take the next step. That way you don't go back. Right. That way you don't have those issues again. So that's a big passion of ours.
It comes back to, what we were talking about in the beginning, where it's like you have trained, strength trained, power lifted, all that. So you have the understanding. So like when these doctors or physical therapists that have never done that shit ever say whatever about training, when they've never done it themselves, and then you have people going out and they're coming to us and be like, oh, well, they said I should never do this. And I'm like, okay, well, there's 55 other things that we can do as a regression of said movement or whatever, and potentially like get you back to doing that movement safely and effectively and all that stuff. So like, I think it's so important to just like have experience, like just lift some weights. If you're in any kind of, this area, and like doctors too, like they're considered, like the top of the food chain, but they don't write workout programs or train people in person and understand like, that whole side of things. So I definitely like misguides people and they're scared when they come in, but that's why we're here.
It's an uphill battle for sure. Just trying to break that stigma.
Yeah. And shout out Justin Rabinowitz for this one. I don't know if it was his original quote, somebody else, but he's a business coach that I work with. And one thing that's really stuck with me from working with him is like, don't take advice from people who aren't living a life that you want to live.
Yeah.
Simple as that, right? Where it's like, if I'm taking business advice from somebody who doesn't even own their own business, like, how do I even know it's valid advice? And that's,
Yeah.
I used to do that because I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know any better, right? But I think like just having that perception of like, is he doing what I want to do? Like, why would I listen to him if he's not?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So I have a question. We got about 10 minutes.
Got a few more left.
Yeah,
Let's
I
get
got a
going.
question. So with your remote business and everything you're doing, how do you go about building that business, like bringing clients in? Like, what's your process there? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is still largely a learning experience for me. Like working with guys like Justin, I have like some one-on-one business coaching set up that's going to start at the end of the month. It's just trying to invest myself into learning marketing and sales, right? So it's like I've spent the past 7 years of like trying to get really good at what I want to do, and I think I've done a pretty good job at doing that. And like that doesn't mean that that stops, but like for the short term, like that's a secondary priority of like continuing my education in the fitness and rehab space. Like that always continues, right? But like right now, it's like investing all that money that maybe I would spend on like a fitness mentorship into a business mentorship. So it's like I know how to target the population that I want to work with. I know how to speak to them. I know how to demonstrate value so just people know I have a service to offer, right? And like that's been my focus for the past, probably like 6 months or so. And I've definitely learned a lot. And I'm just going to keep going down that route until I can, fill my roster and then scale business. Cause if you own your own business, you gotta be good at both at this point. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And for anyone that listens to this, the keys that Devyn said is first, like refine your skill.
Yeah.
Like get good at what you're trying to do. Like get experience, refine it, understand how you want to do things, get really good at it, and then invest in that continued education on the business side as well, not just with what we do. Because I'm there with you too. Like I try every year to make sure like I'm investing into some continued education. I try to shoot for like in-person shit, but like I'm there with you. Like last year with the whole online thing, like I didn't know how to do any of that because I've been in person for the last 6 years. So I said, fuck it, I'm going to invest this money into learning exactly like all those things that you talked about, like how to talk to the people, how to market yourself, like how to do all that shit. And that's what it takes. I think people don't understand, like you have to, it's just like personal training. Like you come to see somebody and invest in that person to help you. It's the same thing with what we do, like spend the money, spend the time to learn from somebody. Like you said, like listen to people who are doing the shit.
I think Devyn said a great word, and for our listeners out there too, if you're wanting to make that transition and start your own business, is find a good mentor that you connect with. What I mean, there's mentorship programs out there, but some of those programs are just sign up and here's some PDFs for you to fucking read, and this is the plan, right? Here's my 6th plan to 100K business in 6 months. All that shit's probably fucking garbage. I mean, find somebody that you can personally connect with and learn from, who's there to help you out. So
like going off that, like I've met a lot of great people in the space. Like if people have trouble finding or they don't know where to look, like I'm happy to share the people who I have trusted and worked with, and just like send them their way too. But yeah, man, I think like Alex, your point too goes back to just the expectation setting, even for ourselves, right? Like, you set it for clients easily, but sometimes we neglect it in ourselves, where it's like, if you've never done something, don't expect to be good at it. Like you're going to be shit, and just like going into it with that being okay. Like it's not going to be good for the start, but like the same way that you learned how to train, like you got to pick up from ground zero and learn it that way. And I think like you can lateralize these experiences, right? Like I see everything through training principles, right? Like even in sales, like specificity, like, am I talking to the person that I want to talk to? Am I doing it in a way that's going to do the thing that I want it to do? Like bring them into me so I can build value and make a sale, right? Like progressive overload. Can I find a sustainable means to market myself? Maybe it's a post a week, maybe it's 2 posts a week, and then just overload it from there. Like see what I can do over the long term to just like progress myself in that way. As I refine my skills, as I get better at writing, I can put out more content at a faster rate. Doing all those things, fatigue management, taking a damn break, like you said, Chris, like you're not all work, like it's okay. Like, and like, I think big conversation for myself is understanding that taking the rest is actually going to help you do the work. And I have to remind myself this constantly, right? Because I always get in the trap of, I could be doing more, like somebody out there is doing more than me. Like I've got to just push myself in that way. And I think that's where like a level of work ethic can become toxic at times, where it's like, you know, value the rest as much as you value the work.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. I mean, my previous job, I did my last 5 years there, I worked 6 days a week, 5 years, almost 70 hours, you know, no personal time, no family time. My body felt like shit. My brain was just not functioning at all. You know what I mean? And then transitioning here and running my own business and having AB next to me, you know, it's just more of the, you know, I feel better. I'm less stressed. It's different type of stress, you know what I mean? But you're not having to answer to you're not having to talk to somebody who doesn't really give a shit about you and your personal life. They just want you to say, hey, I need you here from this time to this time. I don't give a shit. Just fucking make it happen. You know, if I fail, it's because the person in the mirror failed me. I mean, I don't rely on anybody else. You know, that's what drives me too, is, you know what I mean? So last question, bud. What drives you, man? Why'd you get in? Why are you doing it?
Oh man. I think what drove me for years and years was just insecurity. Like, I honestly think that was it. Like I needed to find some sort of meaning and value for myself. At this point, man, like the things that drive me are connection and creativity a lot of the time, right? Like I like to write, doing that along the side. And that's one of the reasons why I really value having my own business, is being able to incorporate other hobbies into what I do, right? So I can fulfill my position in society and make a living and do what I need to do, whatever. But I can also just do all the things that I want to do, and they all feed into like creative aspects of my business, right? So it's like I'm literally just doing hobbies and making money off of it and like providing value for other people. And I think alongside that is just being able to connect with genuine people who, you know, see life in the world and training the same way I do. Like, you know, there's like a sense of community in that. And I think we all need it. Yeah. Like having conversations like these, having conversations with clients, like I always feel very energized afterward. And it just makes me excited to go out and like have the conversation with the next person too. And I think that's one of my favorite things about coaching is like, it's sometimes, you know, like for most people, you put anything on a program, they're going to make progress. But I think it's the experience that goes along with it is always priority number one in my eyes.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. So tell our listeners how to find you, man. Instagram, social media. You said you write, you got a blog.
I don't yet, but I'm working on a newsletter. So it's like, I'm trying to set that up. I might even send it out next week. We'll see. That'll be on my Instagram though. My Instagram is just Devyn.Pioli. So it's DEVYN.PIOLI. That's the only social media I have. So that's the best way to find me for now. And yeah, man, I'm always happy to chat with people. If people just want to hop on a call, like I always do that for free. Cause like I said, like it's my favorite part. Like I'll worry about the bills on the other side of things, but very open to chatting with other like-minded professionals if anybody wants to reach out and chat.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I know I have a great appreciation for you, man. We've talked a little bit, you know, messages back and forth to see every once in a while in the labs and stuff like that. So I definitely love everything that you're doing. I love your mindset. I love how genuine you are, how much you care about, you know, helping people and, you know, bringing a brighter light into the industry. So definitely looking forward to seeing your progress over the next couple of years, man. So,
I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate you guys having me on too. This was a lot of fun. So
yeah, man, we appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Yeah, same to you.
Hell yeah, man. Take care, and then we'll keep in touch, brother. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Again.
Yeah, dude, I'd love to. Anytime. I'm always available for this stuff. So
yeah,
right on, man. All right, brother.
Take care.
Have a good weekend.
See you guys. Yeah, you as well.
See you, man.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh shit.